Media is thought to be an important pillars of democracy. In India, like in elsewhere, media is getting controlled by big money. The houses are raising issues and fighting government in the name of people and democracy. But all times, their business interests are setting their agendas, even if the outset that is happening in the name of democracy. What is your comment on this identity of big media houses and their role in democracy?
Well, we should be cautious about things being done in the name of democracy. Virtually every tyranny says we're doing it in the name of democracy. So Stalin and his advisors were very outspoken about the need to protect democracy in Eastern Europe, people's democracies, from the fascist onslaught from the West. And they probably believed it, because now that the Russian archives are open, we see that even in internal documents, when they're talking to each other, they talk about how important it is to protect democracy from Western influences and so on. In fact, anybody can be in favor of democracy. But what do we mean by it? If we mean by democracy that people can participate in determining policies about issues that concern them, that obviously is undercut if decision-making power is concentrated in narrow hands, and if information is unavailable to the public that would enable them to make reasonable choices. So if they don't have the opportunity to make choices and they don't have the information available to them, you can have a formal democracy, but it doesn't function. And in fact, we don't have to go very far to see that. Let's start right here. U.S. public opinion is very carefully studied, and partly because the business world wants to know what people think. So there's a tremendous amount of study. It's very intensive. It's very systematic and careful. We know a lot about it. Well, it turns out that on a host of major issues, both political parties are well to the right of the population. And the theory, there's a theory behind it. In fact, it was expressed recently by Dick Cheney, but it's across the spectrum. Or it was expressed by the White House. They said, well, you know, the way our system works, the government is not supposed to pay attention to public opinion. You have a chance, people have a chance once every 4 years to express their opinion, and then you should shut up. That's the way our system works, which is correct. Every 4 years, you have a chance to select one or another representative of the business world whose views you reject, and then you're supposed to shut up. And you see it in the significant gulf between policy and opinion on domestic issues, on international issues. So just to take one that's striking and very revealing. The United States has the worst healthcare system in the industrial world. In fact, it's a total scandal. It has twice the per capita expenditures of every other industrial society, and about the worst outcomes. So it's a scandal, and people don't like it. And almost 50 million people have no coverage at all, and many more have limited coverage. And people have opinions about this. And for decades, they've had essentially the same opinion. They want a national health care system. The model that people usually use is Canada, not because it's the best system, but because it's right there, so you see it. They can't talk about Australia because they don't know what the system is, and what's better. But they want a national health care system, something like what's called Medicare, the system for the elderly, extended to the whole population. And that's been true for decades. And it has never come up in elections. It comes up in words, but never actually. In fact, as late as the 2004 election, the press pointed out correctly that the Democratic candidate, Kerry, could not mention any government involvement in the healthcare system because it has too little political support. In other words, it's only supported by a large majority of the population, but it's not supported by the insurance companies and the financial institutions and the pharmaceutical corporations, so therefore has no public political support. Well, a very interesting thing happened between 2004 and 2008, and it's striking that there's no comment on it, though it's dramatically obvious. In 2008, as distinct from 2004, it has become politically possible. So every Democratic candidate has some kind of health care program, not exactly what the public's wanted for 50 years, but approaching it. So what changed between 2004 and 2008? And not public opinion, it's the same. What changed is that manufacturing industry has begun to be hurt badly by the inefficiency of the privatized U.S. healthcare system. So General Motors says it costs them over $1,000 more to produce a car in Detroit than right across the border in Windsor, Canada, because they have a more or less rational healthcare system. Now, when a large sector of the concentrated capital begins to come out in favor of a national healthcare system, then it becomes politically possible and has political support. And that is taken for granted by intellectual opinion, by commentary. You won't find an op-ed about this anywhere because, yes, that's what it works. It's a system run by it's a democratic system run by the business world for their interests. And furthermore, the population is well aware. The most recent, people are regularly asked in polls, who do you think runs the country? And the latest one, January, one of the options given is the country's run by a few big interests looking out for themselves, not for the people. 80% of the population thinks that. So the population is not deluded. Also, should the government pay attention to public opinion even between elections? 95% of the public thinks so. But just having 95% of the public want something is not political support. Well, it's a kind of a democracy. And in fact, maybe the freest country in the world in many ways. Many great achievements, protecting freedom of speech, and so on. But it's not a functioning democracy. Policy is very remote from opinion. That's actually been studied. And it's a systematic gap between policy and opinion. And policy is pretty much what the public thinks. It's determined by a few big interests looking out for themselves with an occasional nod to the public, which you can't disregard.
Absolutely.
And the concentration of media, which is of course overwhelmingly corporate, simply contributes to that. You get one picture of the world, one that's acceptable to the business world.